Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Just Law on IQRA TV. I'm your host Ilyas Bulbulia and I'll be with you for the next hour. As our regular viewers are aware, on Just Law we normally discuss an area of law which is of interest to you, our viewers. Secondly, more importantly, on Just Law, it's a live show, so whatever questions that you have on any aspect of English law, you're able to call on the number that appears at the bottom of your screen, and hopefully I will be able to give you some guidance and answers to your questions as you ask them. And on this show, we should be able to cover a wide range of matters. We get a number of questions on immigration law, which is fantastic. But in addition to immigration law matters about which we get a number of questions, in addition to that, I should be able to answer questions relating to family law matters, personal injury matters, criminal matters, etc. So whatever your questions relate to, please pick up the phone and give us a ring. Just a couple of points before we get going. On a live show, it's obviously not possible to look at any documents that you have. If it transpires during the call that I need to look at your documents, I'll ask you to leave your number with the control room and I will try and call you back and have a more detailed discussion after I've had a look at your documents off air. And again, obviously live on air, you're only able to give general guidance on issues that arise, not able to really look at or take very detailed instructions from you live on air. Again, if it transpires that I do need to speak to you in depth about your issues, whether it's immigration law or whatever else it is, then what I will do is ask you to leave your number with the control room and then I will speak to you in depth after the show has ended. So that's the introduction to our show, as always. And as always, we normally pick a topic on which we have a sort of a discussion or something that I inform the viewers about. And what we started last week, which we weren't able to make much progress on, mashallah, we received a number of calls last week. We talked about immigration law and in particular spouse applications. This is something really we covered in depth maybe 2-3 months ago, and it's an area where we receive a lot of questions. So today what I want to do is go back to spouse applications. It's an area where, as I've said, a lot of the questions are focused. So let's look at that in greater detail. But whatever your questions relate to, whether it's spouse applications, the financial requirement, or whether it's you're in the UK, you want to apply for an extension, or you want to make a human rights application, whatever it is, I should be able to cover that on this show. Now, spouse applications, it's where somebody is applying to sponsor their husband or wife to come to the United Kingdom. It's always quite a topical show. It's a question which raises the most number of questions. And even in practice, a lot of the clients we get have questions regarding spouse applications. How do you successfully sponsor your husband or wife to come from abroad to join you in the United Kingdom? There are a number of requirements which need to be fulfilled, and we'll look at that in greater detail today. As some of our older viewers might be aware, many years ago, this is going back to 2012, the system for sponsoring a husband or wife to come to the United Kingdom was indeed much more straightforward. Now it's more complicated. The rules are very prescriptive in terms of what the Home Office will accept for documents. So it's a much more complicated scheme now for spouse applications. Secondly, the major change that's now taken place is, unlike previously where somebody would get a visa for 1 year and then later on it was, I think, changed to 2 years, they would qualify for indefinite leave. That's all changed now. The path to obtaining indefinite leave is a much longer path. So instead of 1 or 2 years, as was the case before, now it takes a minimum of 5 years to get indefinite leave. And if there's a problem with the application at some stage, it could take even longer. It could take 10 years for somebody to get indefinite leave to remain in the United Kingdom. So there's been a significant change in terms of the documentary evidence that needs to be submitted. There's been a change in terms of how long it takes to obtain indefinite leave under the spouse route. And the third and final major change that we've seen over the years is the substantial increase in fees. There was a time when the total cost for making these applications was in the region of £400, £500. At the moment, the cost is significantly higher. At the moment, a standard application, we're not even talking about a priority application where you want to get a quick decision. A standard application in itself at the moment costs in the region of £2,900. So that's over the last 10 years, there's been at least a 5 to 6-fold increase in the costs involved in making a spouse applications. And that leads me to my next point, which is you have to be extremely careful that the application that you make is made properly. And all the rules and requirements that the Home Office has now set in a lot of detail, those requirements are met. The reason is that, as I've said, the fees that you now pay, they're quite significant. You're paying fees of £2,900. If you get it wrong, potentially you're going to lose £2,900 in fees. So, just from a monetary point of view, it's important that a proper application is made. Now, although we're looking at spouse applications in detail today, even if your questions relate to other matters, feel free to give us a ring on the number that appears at the bottom of your screen. So for spouse application, what are the main requirements? Sometimes it's easier to break it down into different categories of requirements that need to be fulfilled. One way of looking at it is the kind of documents that you need from your home country. So if you have your partner, maybe in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, wherever they are, there are certain documents that they need to get together. And then there are certain documents that the sponsor in the UK needs to get together, particularly relating to finances, relating to accommodation, and relating to the relationship. So sometimes it's helpful to look at it in that type of way. What do you need to get from the home country? Because what you need to do is get those documents here in to the United Kingdom, because ultimately the documents will be submitted here in the United Kingdom. So you've got certain documents which you need to get from the home country, and then you've got documents here such as financial documents, documents relating to the accommodation where the husband or wife will be living, and then proof that the relationship is subsisting. So there's a whole range of documents. What we haven't really covered in previous shows is the process for applying for a spouse visa. A number of times we'll look at the documents that need to be submitted for these kind of applications. We don't tend to look at the process that you need to go through. And for somebody who hasn't gone through the process before, it is quite a daunting process, because the way it's all set up, and we'll go through this in greater detail. On the one hand, you've got an online application which needs to be submitted. Although documents aren't submitted back in the husband or wife's home country, the passports still need to be submitted there. Then you've got paper forms that need to be completed. Then you've got the documents that need to be collected, and they're submitted not in the home country, but they're submitted here in Sheffield. So the process is quite a difficult one to get one's head round as well. Now, the easiest way of looking at it is this, that if you're, for example, sponsoring your wife to come to the United Kingdom, in relation to the majority of countries, the only document that your husband or wife, let's take the example of a wife who's applying to come to the UK, the only document that the wife will be submitting in her own country will be her original passport. So in terms of documents, that's the only document she submits in her home country. All the other documents need to be sent to the UK, to the sponsor, for submission later on to Sheffield, which is the sort of a central visa hub where the majority of spouse applications are dealt with. Now, For most countries, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Morocco, etc., the processing does take place in Sheffield here. There are still some countries where the applications are still being processed in the husband or wife's home country. For example, Saudi Arabia, for example, certain African countries, including South Africa. In terms of those countries, the applications are still being processed by the embassy staff in that home country. But for the vast majority of applicants, the applications are processed in Sheffield here in the UK. So all that the husband or wife, and in our example that the wife who's applying from the home country, the only document that the wife needs to submit for the spouse visa in her home country in the vast majority of cases is just the passport. So the passport will be submitted, and next issue that arises is, when is the passport submitted? Well, that takes us on to the second stage of the application process, which is that an online application has to be made to start the whole process off. So the online application, which is really on behalf of the husband or wife who's coming over, the online application which is completed, once it's all completed, you get to a stage where you have to pay the fees, and at that stage the Home Office will take the fee for the application, which is in the region of £1,700. The Home Office will then take the fee for the contribution to the NHS. They refer to it as the IHS surcharge, the immigration health surcharge, and that amounts to roughly £1,200. So that's where the £2,900 actually comes from. So that money is paid after the online application is done. When that payment is made, at the end of that online application process, you're able to book an appointment for your husband or wife to go and submit her passport. So say for example, the whole online application process has been completed, the payments have been made online. At that stage, the option will be given to book an appointment in the applicant, the husband or wife's home country. So for example, if you take Pakistan as an example, you'll have the option in terms of, you know, whether it's Islamabad, whether it's Mirpur, whether it's Karachi, that the documents are going to be submitted. And these places where the documents are submitted, they are they're not it's not the embassy, it's not the High Commission, they are visa facilitation centres, VFC offices in the home country. The whole purpose that they exist for is basically to accept visa applications, and in a lot of the VFS centres, the applications that they accept isn't necessarily just for the United Kingdom. They will accept applications for other countries such as Canada, etc. It's just an agent who acts on behalf of a number of embassies collecting visa applications, and then they use whatever process that they have for each specific country to send the application off to the relevant embassy. So what I said at the outset was, the husband or wife will have to submit his or her passport at the visa centre, and in terms of when that passport is submitted, that is after the online application form has been completed and submitted online, the payment has been made. It's at that stage that you're able to book an appointment for the passport to be submitted at the visa centre. So basically that's the process in terms of stage one of the process. The online forms are done, the passports are submitted. But that's only the first stage of the process, because you then have all these documents, the supporting documents, which need to be submitted. And later on in the show, as we've done before, we'll look at the documents in greater detail. So the documents relating to the marriage, the finances, accommodation, the relationship. Now, in terms of those documents, they need to be submitted not in the home country, but they will all be submitted in Sheffield. So what will normally happen is the lawyer that's been instructed to prepare the application will normally then collate the documents, check everything's correct, documents in order. There's another sort of a paper form that needs to be completed. Lawyer will complete all that, and the deadline for submitting those documents to Sheffield is basically 2 weeks from the date that the husband or wife in the home country has gone to submit his or her passport. So once that passport's been submitted, really the supporting documents should be submitted here in the UK within about 2 weeks. So that's basically the whole process. The passport being submitted in the home country, the online application being submitted, and the date for the submission of the passport being arranged, supporting documents, all of them basically being submitted in Sheffield here. So that's basically the process that one needs to go through. And indeed, if you haven't really gone through that process before, very difficult to work out from the government website that really this is how the process works. There's no easy guide anywhere which explains that, look, this is what you're going to have to do, step 1, step 2, step 3, etc. So there's nothing like that anywhere. So it's a bit difficult to work out exactly what happens. So basically that's what the position is in terms of the process. What you tend to find is that the difficulties that arise with these cases is really difficulties over the documents that you need to submit to make a successful application to sponsor a husband or wife to come to the UK. Now, the problems can arise in a number of different areas. Now, what I want to do today is, instead of going through the list of questions, list of documents that you submit, what I want to do is just simply focus on the key problem areas that arise when you're making an application to sponsor your husband or wife to the UK. So, starting point with these applications is that it may well be that the person who's applying to come to the United Kingdom, they've had a unusual immigration history, or they've had problems with their immigration history. It might be that they've come to the UK before, they've overstayed. It might be that they've come to the UK and made applications that they shouldn't have really made. An asylum application to try and stay in the UK. Maybe they've made applications in different names, etc. And they've been found out. Ultimately, they've gone back, and now they're applying to come to the UK under a proper route, the spouse route. So their current application is fine. They're going to join their partner in the UK. But if you look at their history, there are problems with the history in terms of UK immigration history. So the reality is, if there's been a problem elsewhere, in my experience, the government doesn't, there's no process for checking that. But if there's a problem with one's immigration history in the UK, obviously the UK government will be aware of that, because once they input the applicant's details into their system, it will show whether the person's been to the UK, whether they've had the problems with their. Now, the reason for flagging that up is that if it's a case where somebody has had problems with their visa, maybe they've overstayed for a long time, maybe they've been asked to report to a reporting centre they haven't done, etc. If there is a problem, then even though they are making a proper spouse application to join their husband or wife in the UK, even then, the previous problems can still be brought up by the immigration officer who is considering this application. So when the immigration officer realizes that there's been a problem before, there is always a possibility that the application will be refused. And it may well be, if the application is refused, then obviously an appeal is granted, but it could mean that there may well be a significant delay in processing the application. Just on problems, one of the issues that I had to deal with recently is where somebody had been in the UK, applied to stay here, the application was refused. So far, not great, but not too bad either. But then they've made an application to the court to challenge that decision. Ultimately, they had lost, and then when they had lost, the judge had made an order saying you need to pay the Home Office's legal costs of something in the region of £400, £500. When we initially made the application for the husband to come to the UK, we weren't aware of that. In fact, the applicant himself wasn't aware that a cost order had been made against him because his previous solicitors had never informed him of that. So we make the application. The Home Office, obviously realizing that this person had come to the UK before, started looking at his immigration history, and they, on their system, they note that this person did challenge a decision in court. When the person challenged the decision in court, the court made a cost order against the applicant, telling the applicant, you've lost this case, you've got to pay X amount of money to the Home Office. So the Home Office had all this information. We didn't, because the applicant himself had never been informed of this by his solicitors. Make the application hoping that it would be successful. Ultimately, 3 months down the line, after waiting for 3 months, we get a decision saying the application has been refused because we've looked at the immigration history. This is what happened. You did not pay the costs that you had to pay to the Home Office. Then we had to work out what had happened before, and the applicant paid the previous costs order that he had to pay, and then we had to reapply. But the applicant ended up losing something in the region of £2,000 because there had been a problem with his immigration history, and he didn't know that there was a cost order which was outstanding, which he had to pay. The point I'm making here is where there are problems with somebody's UK immigration history, then when they go back to their home country and apply, there could be a problem with the correct spouse application that they are making. It's not always the case. There could be a problem. And in my experience, sometimes I get the impression that with some immigration officers, they take a very dim view of people who have come to the UK, overstayed, etc. And when these applicants apply for a spouse visa, then they take they're very suspicious about the application and tend to be more eager, or it becomes more likely that an application will be refused simply because of their background. So that's one of the problem areas that one needs to look at. So let's move on from that. Let's assume there are no significant problems in terms of the immigration history. The next problem that we come across is to do with the marriage. That there are obviously many circumstances where people have previously been married and they've been divorced, and they are obviously applying again to get married. Now, the main issue that arises is over this marriage scenario. The main issue that arises is where people have been married before. It may well be that the divorce that they've done isn't a proper divorce as far as English law is concerned. We'll look at this problem area after we've taken a short break.